When I was a child, I grew up in a small and relatively impoverished town in the English countryside. The place was ravaged decades ago, and the last of the mines had been finally closed. Not being a particularly beautiful place, unlike its many neighboring coastal towns, the town would slowly and silently decay. When the mines closed in the late 70s, a man named Thomas Rowe would decide to start a shop from his front room using his handful of savings. His ever-dedicated wife, a woman by the name of Jenn, quit her job as a seamstress to work the shop for him and do all the bookkeeping. The two understood it would be a difficult journey ahead of them, but they knew it was the kind of challenge that they wanted and were willing to work hard together. Over the next few hard-fought years, the two would build a successful store, fully converting the bottom floor of their home into the shop floor. Due to their willingness to lend a hand to anyone who needed it, the community around them looked after them in kind. Tom and Jenn General became a bastion of the community and a seemingly permanent fixture in the town. My mom would tell me that even she and her friends called Jenn Nana Jenn, a name I'd known her as myself for as long as I can remember. She had a warmth about her, a soft, welcoming smile that wrapped you in an all-encompassing warmth followed by a genuine interest in your day, and maybe even a free sweet if we don't tell Tom. Thomas Rowe was lovely, but he was just Tom. Only Jenn was Nana Jenn, and everyone loved her for that. Even after his death, the sign Tom put up all those years still hung. I must have been 9 or 10 when he passed. It was nice to see everyone come together to mourn with and take care of Nana Jenn, a community that over the years had become distant and fractured, joining forces to help this woman who had taken care of them for so long. After the shop was returned to its original state as a residential home, you would often see Nana Jenn wandering around town. Whether she was off to the dry cleaners or on her way to an appointment, she would always have time to stop, chat, and make sure you were okay. I swear to God, even after that woman started losing her keys and jewelry, she always seemed to remember everyone by name. At least until the events of our story. I was a young, brown-haired idiot when I turned 14. That's okay, because my best friend Jason was just the same, only his hair was shorter compared to my shoulder-length locks. We weren't a pair of miscreants or anything, but when you're a bored teen in the countryside, there is a certain level of mischief that is entailed. The odd prank here or there, scrumping for apples, and the odd bit of mild arson in some random field. One time, when playing a game where you knock on the door and run away before they catch you, Jason was able to sneak right up behind me, and right as I knocked on the door, he kicked me on my backside, fully flat on the floor, prone on my back. With a deep sigh, I accepted my fate when I heard a soft melody coming from the doorway. "Oh, Matthew, what's happened?" Looking up, I see the slightly concerned face of Nana Jenn looking down at me quizzically. "So sorry, I fell over when on the step," I blurted out, scrambling to my feet to meet her at eye level. "You know, that little doorstep gets me too," she chuckled. "So what are you doing here, dear?" "Oh, I was just, coming to check in on you," I replied, unsure of how convincing my response was. "Just making sure you're doing okay, or if you need help with anything?" "Well, sweetheart, it's funny you should mention because just today I lost my special necklace that Tom got me." "Well, where do you last remember having it?" came the approaching voice of Jason, who had clearly come back after I didn't come running behind him. "Hello, Jason. Well, I had it at the butcher's, but then I didn't have it by the time I got home, and I didn't stop anywhere between the two. I had a little look, but my eyes aren't what they used to be." "We're not doing anything, so we could look. It's the summer holidays, so we have the time," I explained, smiling at the ever more frail-seeming Nana Jenn. "You know the necklace I'm talking about, right?" she asked. "Yeah, of course we do," I replied, and honestly, we did. The necklace she was referring to was as permanent a fixture as she was. A stunning tin necklace whose tarnish didn't distract from the intricate beauty of the etching of a Celtic cross behind a large cat. I often worried about her spine due to the size of the necklace. However, she always seemed to be so used to it that it was more natural to compensate for the weight of the charm than not. With that, Jason and I had become the initial search team for Nana Jenn's necklace. It wasn't long until we were able to rope others into it as we asked everyone we saw along our search path. In no time, what felt like half the town was now either actively or passively on the hunt for her pendant. Maybe it was guilt for not finding it, but Jason and I became regulars at Nana Jenn's home. She always seemed happy to see us, and honestly, we both kinda enjoyed spending the time with her. We'd often do little chores for her, help her carry things around, and always be willing to taste test her wonderful pastries. Nana Jenn, one afternoon, told us the story of her necklace. It was given to her by Tom when he received a large raise at work. All the wives of the miners here had been given one. She had loved it so much and taken care of it for so long. Jen was the last person alive who had received one, but after this many years, that was to be expected. Slowly, but all of a sudden, Nana Jenn started to go downhill. Little things were forgotten here or there, less energy to do what she loved, and even her eyes had become slowly more sunken into her skull. She was aging before our very eyes, decaying, and before long it would be my family who would offer to take care of her. With all the time I had spent with her, my mom and dad had bonded with her as much as I had. So when they noticed how bad she had gotten, our home became the obvious choice to take care of her, considering her lack of remaining family. "So my bed is here?" breathed a slightly confused but ever considerate Nana Jenn. "Yes, Jen, we have put a new bed with a new mattress especially for you. We've even got a load of your stuff from your room to make it feel like home." My mom had always been a kind woman, heavily influenced by Nana Jenn and her own mother. "Steph, you've been too good to me." A tear appeared in Jen's eyes as she hugged my mom, her ginger hair getting tangled in Jen's face. You've looked after me and this family for so long, we're just happy that we have the opportunity to pay it back," reasoned Steph, who herself was now fighting back the tears. Nana Jenn settled in quickly. However, it would not be long until we noticed something strange. Both my dad and I had separately heard a soft rhythmic whispering coming from her room late at night. These small, creepy, yet unexplainable instances got overshadowed by the chaotic trial of the festive season. For just the month of December, we had hired a nurse to take care of her simple needs, so we didn't have to worry. My parents could take me and my sister out for festive activities without having to worry about Jen. The nurse would be a good choice too, as we found out that this would probably be the last Christmas for our great Aunt Sophie. So from Christmas to New Year, we would be staying with her immediate family up country. The day we were due back, the nurse had stopped taking our calls. At best, when we would call the house, all we got was a confused Nana Jenn, who by this point was beginning to degrade to such a point that she had no idea where the nurse was, or even if she had seen the nurse at all recently. Hurrying home, all we could find upon returning was the nurse's handbag with her phone, wallet, and keys all missing. Nana Jenn was sitting there on her bed, silently drinking tea and staring at TV static, her warm smile plastered blankly across her face. Mom and Dad would take turns looking after her while I took care of a lot of the household chores. Seeing how hard they had it with her, I didn't mind taking the lion's share of the chores. I didn't even mind the continued whispering all that much. You'd be surprised how quickly the creepy can become banal, just part of the background noise of an ever more complex life. Lying in bed one night, I heard the door creaking open right as I was right at the precipice of sleep, forcing me awake with a jolt. I looked around to confirm my dream-fed paranoia that something beyond a nightmare had made its way in. There was nothing, even when I turned my lamp on. Nothing at all was in my room, and I could go back to sleep. I turned the lamp off and resumed my former position, comfortable once again under the sheets. An undetermined amount of time later, it happened again. A loud creak echoed into my bedroom. Turning my head to look at the doorway to my bedroom, I saw it was in the same position as it was before. Had I imagined it? A loud snoring came rumbling through the house, a comforting reminder that my parents were just feet away. Eyes open, face to the door, and meditating on the muddled roar emanating from the hall, I suddenly hear a new sound, a fast, rhythmic, white noise. Breathing coming from somewhere nearby. Then I heard it. Eyes focused on the static door, I heard a creak. There was only one other place that could have been. Turning on my lamp, I returned to my original orientation facing the wardrobe. It was Jenn, inside the wardrobe, her flower-embossed nightgown covering much of the gap in the wardrobe door. At the top of her face, one eye poking through the crack and a familiar soft smile across her face. The most disturbing part was her fast and almost rhythmic breathing, like she was excited. Afraid to break eye contact, I called out to my parents, unmoving and afraid to move, afraid to even blink. My father came in like a shot and quickly escorted a very confused woman back to her bed. It was strange, however. The moment my father entered the room, she stopped smiling and began to breathe at a regular pace. I didn't sleep well that night. I didn't have a good night's sleep for a long time. The image of her dull, sunken eyes, excitedly making direct eye contact with me, would singe itself into my mind any time the lights would go out. Shortly after that night, my sister would begin complaining of an awful smell. Her room being the one directly above Nana Jenn, it was suspected that the smell from Jenn's room rising up through the floor was the cause. It didn't matter what we did, however. No amount of potpourri or air fresheners would cover that awful smell. Even after aggressive attacks from gallons of Febreze and enough dented powers to solve any infestation, a week later, the smell returned just as rancid as before. Maybe we should have been more thorough in our investigation of the smell, but my sister was leaving very soon for university, so it wasn't the highest priority after a while. Nana Jenn just got worse from there. She kept staring at the ceiling in her room, just sitting there and smiling at nothing. We'd occasionally find her in places like the attic or a storage cupboard, just looking at us as she smiled a blank artifice of her former caring expression. She grew ever gaunt and frail-looking. However, the way she moved so confidently was so disjointed from her skeletal frame. Her skin had sunk so low it was almost separate from any sort of bone structure underneath. When my great-aunt died, it caused a lot more drama in the immediate family than expected. So, Mom and Dad had to go pretty much immediately. They managed to find a nurse to look after Nana Jenn again, after vetting this one with much more scrutiny. She even agreed to keep an eye out on me and make sure I don't burn anything down in the house while cooking or anything. Maja was nice. I know that's not a very creative description, but it fits who she was. I couldn't tell you where she was from, but she was just the right mix of both professional and understanding of the fact that I was a young teenage boy left to his own devices. She cooked kapitka a few times to make sure I had a few vegetables. I know it had potato in it and tasted great, but again, I couldn't tell you the origins of the dish. Little Kochani, what is wrong with her exactly? Maja asked while I was sitting on the sofa watching TV one evening. We're not sure. Honestly, the doctors aren't sure either. It's kinda like a degenerative brain thing, they were saying, but it's not exactly like dementia. I explained to the best of my capability. That is pretty much what your mother told me, she retorted, looking off into the distance a little. How come? Like, what brought this on? I asked. She's just... Maja pauses to take a deep breath. Your grandmother is saying things like wrong things. Wrong things? I parroted. Things like about a man who lives in the room with her, a man who is angry with her. I could see the deep concern on her face. Yeah, I've heard stuff like that from her, but I guess she's just getting worse lately. I reassured her. She never does anything but stare and smile, though. I wouldn't worry. I know it's creepy, though. Maja smiled at me, attempting to show she was reassured, and messed my hair up before then returning to Nana Jenn's room. It was a few days later when I heard her frantically knocking at my bedroom door. Still paranoid and vigilant at night, I woke up quickly and cautiously announced the visitor in. Maja burst into the room, panic clear in her face, barely able to get a word out. I quickly noticed her hands were covered in blood. I have to go. I saw him here. This was all I could get out of her before a figure blocked out the incoming light from the hallway. Taking both of our attention immediately, we saw Nana Jenn standing just beyond the threshold of the doorway. Maja screamed a blood-curdling scream before suddenly and without any warning jumping out of my bedroom window. I sat there in shock, staring at the broken window as Jenn shuffled away, restoring light to the room. A police investigation had, from what I could gather through eavesdropping, discovered that she had a history of bipolar disorder and had divorced her husband about 6 months before her suicide, just confirming the narrative they already assumed. I became obsessed. Jason had noticed the level of obsession that had taken me. He even asked about everything one day, and I broke. I cried, even. I split everything, what had happened, what I was feeling, and most importantly, my theories about what was happening. On those theories, nothing was a solid hypothesis, but rather I knew something was happening, and it was Nana Jenn at the root of it all. Jason and I made plans to have him stay over that weekend, something that had become rare since Nana Jenn had moved in, but with my parents spending one night away for their anniversary, it was the perfect time. We were going to stay up late and sneak down and see what was happening in Jen's room at night, and what was going on with the whispering. Dude, if you scare me on purpose, I will kick you so hard in the nuts, Jason warned me in a whisper as he descended the stairs late that Saturday night. I promise you, if anything is gonna scare you, it's gonna be her. I replied, eyes fixed on the bottom of the stairs. Well, okay. I still don't like that I'm going first. It's your creepy-ass house. With that, a resigned Jason tentatively made his way down the stairs, reacting to every creak and groan from the floorboards. As we turned the corner, we immediately heard the whispering, a soft, raspy chant emanating from the place we knew Nana Jenn resided. Jason took a deep breath before quietly knocking on her door. I shot Jason a quizzically angry look, to which he just shrugged before unconfidently gripping the handle. With a nod to me, Jason opened the door. What hit us first was the stench. An expression mirroring my disgust was plastered across Jason's face as soon as the door opened. Then we saw her. Nana Jenn stood in the center of the room, her clothing on the floor, and the nude skin that was so usually covered in her gown was a mass of decaying and rotting flesh. She panted as she smiled towards the ceiling once again. A dissociative freefall took hold, almost like my brain was trying to protect me by making everything feel like a dream, like it couldn't be real. I didn't even notice that Jason was screaming. I just saw her. By the time I had regained control over my senses, I noticed two screams in unison. One was Jason screaming in an all-encompassing terror, and the second was Jen, who was now on top of Jason, her thumbs buried deep into his eye sockets as she screamed into his face. Blustering all my strength, I kicked the thing that was Jen off of Jason, injuring my ankle as I did so with a dissatisfying crunch. Even through my pain, I still saw her thumbs leave Jason's eyes with a sickening squelch as she tumbled a meter or so away. I wrenched a whimpering Jason up and began practically dragging him out of that room and out of the front door. Closing the door behind me, I continued to drag Jason away to somewhere, to the family next door. They owned guns, and I knew we'd be safe. In tears, I pulled Jason the 400 meters or so to the next door and began banging on the door as hard as I could. Jason is alive. Blind and sour about it, but alive. As for Jen, she went missing immediately after. It would be another year of sleepless nights before she was found dead and naked in the local forest by an old Celtic shrine. The worst part was what we found when she left. After investigating the ever-present smell and pulling up the floorboards in my sister's old bedroom, we found her. Jen had killed the first nurse, ripped her eyes out, pulled out her throat, then hidden her in the floors. There was plenty of shock and sorrow in the community at the news of their former matriarch, but those feelings were all temporary and soon faded with time. Now all the town is left with is the eerie tale of an old woman with no skin who haunts an old pile of stones out on the moors.